Political tensions are soaring in Iraq as protesters rally in and around the nation's parliament building.
The unrest comes nearly 10 months after Iraq's last election. Followers of influential Shia leader Muqtada al-Sadr are trying to hold parliament so they can't create a new government. Al-Sadr told his supporters to vacate parliament and continue protests outside the offices. They've been camped inside the building since Saturday. Al-Sadr's followers won the most seats in parliament, but they still do not have enough seats or support to form a government. Last week, they gave up their seats to opponents, a move that's creating a divide within Iraq's Shia factions.
For more, let's bring in Doug Ollivant. He's a senior fellow at the New America Foundation, a nonpartisan think tank. Douglas, thanks for being with us. Of course, you've also served as director for Iraq at the National Security Council during both the Bush and Obama administration. So you'd be the guy to tell us. We'll start broadly. We're looking at these pictures. Can you sort of just give us a sense of the issues surrounding the October elections, why we're seeing what we're seeing?
Sure. Good to talk to you, Jim. What we saw in October, which were technically early elections brought about by an earlier set of protests, was the party of Muqtada al-Sadr, which some of us remember from the the Iraq occupation days. His party won a plurality of the seats, but only 22%. So they were the largest party, but still only controlled 22% of the seats. There's multiple parties involved here, obviously. So they tried to form a government for the longest time and simply couldn't get the two-thirds majority put together that's required to elect an Iraqi president and move on with the process. So in frustration, a couple weeks ago, al-Sadr told all his followers to simply resign from the parliament. His opponents then replaced those people in the seats, and they were just about to form a new government when the Sadrists occupied the offices that you saw there on the screen, taking over the legislative building and making them unable to form a government. And that's where we are today.
And Doug, how are the various Shia factions within Iraq playing a part in this political divide?
Well, almost all the Shia factions that are not Sadr, and that includes the most Iranian-influenced factions and also the least Iranian-influenced factions, have banded together. So it's really Sadr against almost everybody else, with a few independents thrown in. What's interesting about the current crisis is, especially for those of us who remember the Iraq occupation, we're used to thinking about Sunni versus Shia versus Kurds, about the three different ethno-sectarian groups in tension with each other. But what we're seeing today is tension within those groups. The Shia factions fighting among themselves is the biggest conflict, but also in the north, the two Kurdish groups, the PUK and the KDP, the two major Kurdish parties, can't agree on who the president should be. So the big fights in Iraq now appear to be within the groups rather than between the groups.
And in your view, could outside forces, say the UN, help mediate a deal?
Well, I think everyone knows that there are plenty of people who would be happy to mediate. The UN, the EU, the Americans or the British might be a little controversial, likewise the Iranians, but there are plenty of external parties if the Iraqis want them. So far, they've not asked for an external mediator, and I think we need to let them figure this out themselves. If they want help, they can ask for it, and I'm sure there are plenty of people who would be happy to help assemble everyone around the table and move past this crisis.
Doug Ollivant, thank you so much for breaking this down for us.
Thanks, Debra.